The message from the stars in the cold silence beyond Jupiter's orbit. Something whispered across the stars. A signal not made by human hands reached Earth's deep space network. At first, scientists thought it was a new comet reflection or static from a dying sun. But when they decoded the rhythm, it formed words. And those words were filled with pride and threat. Humans, surrender your weapons and kneel before the Galactic Council, the message said. It was not a greeting, not an invitation, but a command. Across every human colony and orbital station, the message repeated again and again. It called Earth dangerous, unstable, and unfit to hold power among the stars. People gathered in streets watching the sky screens, silent and angry. Children asked why aliens hated them when they had done nothing wrong. On the moon base, soldiers looked up from their posts and clenched their fists. They had fought for peace for decades, yet now they were called monsters. In the underground city of New Geneva, world leaders met in secret. The air was tense, filled with the hum of machines and quiet breathing. Admiral Rayan, a veteran of the Mars Defense Wars, stood before them. He had gray eyes, a scar on his cheek, and a voice calm as stone. They call us killers because we refuse to die quietly, he said. They fear us because we fight back when threatened. No one in the room disagreed, only silent nods followed his words. Outside, the stars seemed to flicker, as if they were listening too. The Galactic Council believed humans would bow as other species had done. They thought Earth was still weak, still healing from old wars. But they had forgotten one truth about humanity. No species in the galaxy had survived extinction as many times as humans had. While alien empires rose and fell, humanity endured. When worlds burned, humans rebuilt. When they lost, they learned. When they were cornered, they became something unstoppable. To answer the Council's demand, a single ship was prepared. Not a warship, but a diplomatic cruiser named Resolute. It carried envoys, translators, and soldiers dressed in black armor with no flags. They were called the Peacekeepers, a name that sounded gentle but hid quiet power. When Resolute left Earth's orbit, billions watched its white trail fade into the dark. People whispered prayers, some for peace, some for vengeance. The ship's commander, Captain Elias, stood at the window and whispered to himself, "If they call us monsters, let them see what kind of monsters we are." Days later, Resolute entered the Council's capital system. A sea of alien warships surrounded it, their cannons glowing like suns. Every voice on every frequency shouted, "Human vessel, surrender immediately." But Resolute continued forward, silent and steady. The aliens laughed, certain that humans were bluffing. To them, this was a show of arrogance, not courage. They didn't know that every human ship was always ready to fight. Even when carrying diplomats, there were warriors hidden beneath polite smiles. When Resolute landed on the marble plains of the Council world, cameras from across the galaxy turned to record the moment. Billions of eyes watched, waiting to see humanity kneel. The alien high speaker stepped forward, his skin shining silver, his voice sharp. "Human delegation," he said. "Submit or be erased." The crowd of alien nobles murmured in delight, expecting obedience, but the human commander walked down the ramp slowly, his armor dark under twin suns. He removed his helmet, looked at the Council, and spoke only one line. "Humanity does not negotiate with murderers," he said. The alien speaker blinked, unsure he had heard correctly. Then laughter erupted across the court, cruel and loud. But the laughter died when the sky itself began to move. From the void above the planet, shadows appeared, long and vast, one after another, enormous shapes uncloaked. Terran dreadnoughts, black as night, thousands of kilometers long. Their hulls bore the burning blue emblem of Earth. Every weapon port opened at once, filling the heavens with silent fire. The Council's fleets panicked, retreating in chaos. No one had expected humans to bring war machines to a peace meeting. Yet not a single shot was fired. The ships only hovered like predators in wait. The message was clear. Humanity had come not to beg, but to warn. Back on Earth, people watching the broadcast gasped and cheered. For the first time in history, the galaxy saw what Earth had built in the dark. Not out of hate, but out of fear and memory. Because humans had learned long ago that peace must be defended by strength. The Alien Council finally understood the meaning behind the words. Humans would talk of peace but never bow to killers. The broadcast ended with one sentence glowing across every screen. Earth stands free and humanity kneels to none. And in that moment, the galaxy learned something it would never forget. The humans were done apologizing. The humans were done hiding. The era of silence was over, and the age of Earth had begun, the silence before war. The galaxy did not speak for 3 days. After the human commander's words echoed across the stars, every world stayed silent. The Galactic Council had never been defied like that. No species had ever looked them in the eye and refused to kneel. On the Council's capital world, chaos ruled behind the shining halls. Ambassadors shouted, soldiers rushed, orders were sent and cancelled again and again. The alien high speaker who had threatened Earth sat alone. Trembling behind his desk, he had expected fear from the humans. Not calm defiance wrapped in cold steel. Across the galaxy, billions watched the replay of the broadcast. Some laughed at humanity's arrogance. Others whispered in awe. For the first time, people began to wonder if humans were something more. If perhaps the stories of Earth's dark wars and burning skies were not exaggerations. On the Terran flagship Resolute, Captain Elias stood at the bridge window. The stars shimmered around them like silent witnesses. His crew waited for orders, but none came yet. The humans were not in a hurry. Patience was also a weapon. Down in the ship's command deck, engineers maintained the engines in quiet focus. They knew the fleet above the Council world could destroy it in minutes. But humanity was not here to destroy, not yet. They were here to remind the galaxy that threats have consequences. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire through cities and colonies. People filled streets waving flags and banners that read "No more chains." The governments called for calm, but pride was already burning in every heart. Even the poorest worker on Mars felt taller that day. In the void between stars, the Terran fleet waited. Dreadnoughts drifted in perfect formation, engines cold and silent. Inside each ship, soldiers checked their weapons and stared at old photos of home. Some smiled, some prayed, all were ready. But humanity was not the only one preparing. Deep inside Council space, alien admirals gathered in secret. They spoke in cold voices about revenge, about teaching Earth its place. They believed the humans were bluffing, that no species could fight the entire galaxy. Yet even among them, fear whispered quietly. Old stories returned. Tales of a world that survived nuclear fire, of oceans poisoned yet reborn, of people who turned ruins into cities, of soldiers who fought until there was nothing left to fight for, and still stood in the far reaches of the Andromeda sector. A small alien colony sent a private message to Earth. They said, "We will not fight you. We have seen your strength." It was the first time in history another world refused the Council's order. That single message changed everything. Human intelligence caught the transmission and smiled quietly. Earth did not reply, but it was noted, remembered, and marked with care, because humanity knew the real war was not fought with guns first. It was fought with hearts, with fear, and with belief. Back on the Council world, the High Speaker made a mistake. He sent one last broadcast to all systems. His voice shaking but proud, he said, "The humans will be erased. Their worlds will burn." It was meant to frighten the galaxy, but instead it united humanity completely. Within hours, Earth's command centers went dark. Every transmission stopped. Every human ship ceased public communication. The galaxy thought Earth had gone silent out of fear. But that silence was not weakness. It was preparation far below the clouds of Mars. Deep inside the mountain bases, engines that had slept for decades came alive. Rumbling through the ground, Titan-class warships were awakened, their hulls glowing with old Terran runes. They were built for one purpose, to end wars before they began. In the asteroid belts, mining stations turned into gun platforms overnight. Every civilian freighter secretly revealed hidden armor and plasma turrets. For years, humanity had prepared for this moment. They never trusted the peace the Council offered, because they had earned none on Luna. Admiral Rayan stood in the command center watching the holographic map. He said quietly, "They think we are angry." His aide looked at him and asked, "Aren't we, sir?" Rayan smiled, a hard and tired smile, and replied, "No, we are ready." When dawn rose over Earth, every human ship's lights turned on at once from orbit. It looked like a crown of fire around the planet. The Terran defense network activated, covering Earth in a shield of blue energy. Across the galaxy, spies reported it with trembling voices. The humans are mobilizing. And in that moment, the Council realized too late what they had done. They had not frightened Earth, they had awakened it. The silence before war had ended. The next sound would be the thunder of human engines crossing the stars. The price of threats. The Council believed they still held control. Even after the humans' silence, they sent fleets to Earth's borders. They thought the humans were bluffing, using empty threats to gain respect. They thought they could scare the Terrans with numbers. They were wrong. At the edge of the Sol system, the first alien armada appeared. Thousands of ships formed a wall of silver and light, each one armed with weapons that could melt moons. They came with arrogance, not fear. Their leader, Admiral Vash, spoke proudly on the open channel. Earth is hereby surrounded. Surrender and avoid destruction. His voice was broadcast to all systems. Billions watched, expecting the humans to answer. But no one replied. Only the stars stared back in silence. The alien fleet waited. Hours turned to days, and still there was no sound. Then, without warning, the darkness itself began to move. The humans had not vanished. They had been waiting. Behind every planet, behind every asteroid, engines flared alive. The Terran fleet rose like ghosts from the void. Not hundreds, but thousands of black ships, silent, steady and cold. Every human ship's hull bore a single glowing symbol, a blue circle with a burning white core, the mark of Earth. The alien admiral froze, his voice shaking as he whispered, "They built this many ships." In secret, one transmission came from the Terran flagship Nemesis. The voice of Admiral Rayan was calm. "Deep and final," he said, "you came to our home with weapons. You will leave with memories." Then the stars lit up. Human dreadnoughts opened fire with energy beams that sliced through space. No roar, no warning, only white light that turned alien ships to dust. The Council's armada tried to flee, but space itself seemed to close around them. Every escape route filled with human interceptors, precise and ruthless, within minutes. The first wave was gone, thousands of ships erased. Not even debris left behind. It was not a battle. It was a message. A reminder of what happens when someone threatens Earth. The galaxy trembled. Every broadcast showed the destruction. Every world whispered in fear. The humans had not started a war. They had ended one before it began. But even in victory, they did not celebrate. On Earth, there were no cheers, only silence and respect for the dead. In the ruins of the Council's confidence, smaller species began to rethink their loyalty. Planets once under Council control started to contact human diplomats. They asked for peace, for trade, for protection. They did not see monsters anymore, they saw survivors. Meanwhile, the Council's leaders argued and blamed one another. Some said to sue for peace, others said to destroy Earth at all costs. But their fleets were shattered, their unity broken, and still, no one could understand how humanity built such power unnoticed. The truth was darker than they imagined. For decades, humans had been building in silence, mining black holes for energy, forging ships inside dying stars. They learned from every war in their history and never forgot. In a secret archive beneath the Pacific Ocean, the story of that preparation was written. It began the day humanity first joined the Galactic community, when they saw how the Council treated weaker races, when they saw whole civilizations turned into slaves or test subjects. From that day, Earth began to prepare not for peace, but for survival. Back in orbit, Admiral Rayan stood watching the battle's aftermath. His officers awaited new orders, but he gave none. He said quietly, "Let the galaxy see the cost of threats," and then ordered every surviving alien ship to be spared. "Send them home," he said. "Let them tell the truth." The galaxy soon learned what true mercy looked like, terrifying and calm, because humans could destroy everything but chose not to. And that was what frightened the Council more than anything. Across alien worlds, parents whispered human stories to their children. They said, "Never anger the Terrans." Even criminals stopped using humans as insults, for humanity had become something far greater, a warning written in fire. That night on Earth, the sky shimmered with returning fleets. Every ship's lights formed a constellation shaped like a hand reaching outward. Not in war, but in promise. A promise that Earth would never kneel again. In the dark halls of the Council, silence ruled. The High Speaker looked into the void and whispered, "They were supposed to be savages, but they are gods of war." And far away on the Terran command deck, Admiral Rayan looked up at the stars and replied softly, "No, we are just human." The return of the Council's vengeance for a short time. The stars seemed calm. After the destruction of the Council's first armada, the galaxy held its breath. No one dared to speak against Earth. No one dared to send another threat. But power never sleeps and hatred never truly dies. In the shadows of a dying sun, the Council rebuilt. Their leaders hid in secret stations far from the reach of Terran patrols. They gathered what was left of their fleets, searching for weapons that could break humanity. They whispered a new word among themselves: Extinction Protocol. To them, it was no longer about control or politics. It was about revenge, about erasing the one species that had humiliated them before every eye. They began to recruit other races, promising protection and wealth. But every alliance they built was built on fear, not loyalty. Back on Earth, humanity knew the silence would not last forever. The Terran command read every intercepted signal, every coded whisper. Admiral Rayan stood in the war room, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. Red dots marked enemy gatherings. Blue ones showed Terran colonies, and yellow ones, unknown, shifting like ghosts. "They are rebuilding," said his aide quietly. Rayan nodded, his voice steady. "Let them. We will be ready when they come." Across the solar system, preparations began again. The Titan-class warships were upgraded with new cores forged in the heart of Jupiter's storms. AI fleets patrolled the outer rings, scanning the void for any movement, and in hidden shipyards, something even greater was being born. The project was called Aegis, a name whispered only in dark rooms, a shield that could protect entire systems, bending space and light itself. If completed, it would make the Terran colonies untouchable, but it required time, and the Council planned to strike before that time arrived. In the deep cold of Sector 9, the first sign of vengeance appeared. A Terran listening post vanished without a signal. When a patrol ship arrived days later, it found nothing but silence and drifting debris. The walls of the outpost were melted, the metal turned to glass. No explosion, no escape pods. Only the mark of something new, something terrible. Human scientists studied the remains and found strange energy residue. It was unlike any known weapon. Captain Elias, now commanding the dreadnought Nemesis, looked at the report and said, "They found a way to burn space itself." The Council had created a weapon that tore holes through reality, a beam that could erase a ship's atoms and the space around it. They called it the Divine Light, and they believed it would end the age of Earth. When the first human fleet encountered it, 20 ships vanished in seconds. There was no explosion, no sound, just pure white silence. But even as they died, the Terran fleet managed to transmit data back to command. And from that data, the scientists began to build a counter. In the underground labs beneath Antarctica, engineers worked without sleep. They studied the strange energy and discovered its weakness. It needed a focus crystal grown from a living star, something rare, fragile, and unstable. If the humans could disrupt that crystal, the weapon would destroy itself while they worked. The Council prepared its grand assault. Thousands of ships gathered near the black nebula of Kareth, hidden behind storms of plasma. They waited for the signal to strike Earth again. Their admirals smiled, certain that humanity's era was finally over. But the humans were already watching. Satellites cloaked in dark matter recorded every movement. The Terran AI known as Oracle whispered into Rayan's ear, "They are ready, sir." But so are we. Rayan turned toward the hollow display of the Earth Defense Fleet. He said softly, "Then it begins again. But this time we finish it." Across every colony, the alert code Eden Rising was transmitted. Every ship, every soldier, every drone prepared for what was coming. Even civilians knew what it meant. This was not just defense. This was survival. When the Council's armada finally jumped toward Earth, they expected panic, confusion, fear, but instead, they found empty space, no human ships, no signals, nothing. For a single second, they thought Earth had fled. Then their sensors screamed. Behind them, space cracked open like glass breaking under pressure. And from that crack emerged the Terran fleet, glowing red and blue, moving like a storm. The voice of Admiral Rayan came through every frequency, cold, calm, and final. "You came again with murder in your hearts. Now see what mercy costs." The second war had begun, but this time it was not the galaxy versus Earth. It was humanity versus vengeance itself. And as the first human cannons fired, the stars themselves seemed to burn brighter, because even the heavens knew. This was not just another battle. This was judgment, delivered by the species that never forgot, never forgave, and never knelt. The wrath of Earth, the black nebula of Kareth, burned. When the Council's fleet opened fire, the sky itself seemed to tear apart. But before their beams could reach the human ships, the void shimmered like liquid, and then the light vanished, swallowed whole. The Aegis shield had come online, a barrier woven from gravity and light, bending the laws of physics. The Council admirals screamed as their superweapons failed. Their beams dissolved against invisible walls that glowed faintly blue. Within the Terran flagship Nemesis, Captain Elias watched calmly. "Project Aegis is holding," reported the technician, voice trembling with awe. "Then hold position," Elias replied. "They will break before we do." Outside, Earth's fleet moved with silent precision. Thousands of dreadnoughts advanced in perfect formation. Each ship released drones that looked like falling stars. They streaked across the battlefield, splitting into swarms of light and metal. The drones were not ordinary machines. They were guided by human minds connected through neural links. Each soldier felt what their machines saw, heard what they heard, fought as one will. It was not a fleet. It was a single living entity called humanity. The Council fired again and again, plasma storms, quantum lances, antimatter torpedoes. Nothing pierced the shield. In return, the humans opened fire. Their cannons did not roar. They hummed, soft and steady like a heartbeat. Beams of condensed light sliced through entire formations. Alien ships melted in silence, breaking apart like dust in wind. The galaxy had seen wars before, but never like this. There was no rage in the Terrans' actions. No shouting, no chaos, only control. From the bridge, Admiral Rayan watched the numbers vanish from his display. "Status?" he asked. "Enemy fleet reduced by 60%, came the answer. Rayan nodded. "Continue containment. No unnecessary kills. Even in war, humanity showed restraint. They could have wiped the galaxy clean, but they didn't. They wanted the Council to understand power was not the same as cruelty. Far away on the Council's command world, panic spread. Messages flooded in, broken and terrified. "They're unstoppable," one officer cried. "They're not fighting for victory," another said. "They're fighting for meaning." Back in space, a single alien dreadnought broke formation and charged. It aimed for the Terran flagship, desperate to strike one final blow. But before it reached the humans, its hull cracked open from within, and the ship exploded into a storm of white light. The humans had turned the Council's own weapon, the divine light, against them. They had studied it, reversed it, perfected it, and now used it as a shield breaker that tore space apart around enemy ships. Captain Elias whispered, "We learned your trick, and we made it better." The alien admirals, watching the horror unfold, realized the truth too late. Every weapon they built, every threat they made, humans had already learned from it, and that was humanity's greatest strength. As the battle raged, something strange happened. In the middle of destruction, the human fleet stopped firing. Every ship held its position. Every cannon went silent. Across the battlefield, through open channels, a single human voice spoke. "This is not revenge," the voice said. "This is a reminder. We asked for peace. You answered with fire. We warned you once, and you ignored us. Now you see the cost of threatening those who refuse to kneel." The transmission played across every world, every colony, every ship. Even those who had never met a human before watched in silence, because in that moment they realized what humanity truly was. Not monsters, not gods, but something the galaxy had never seen before. Survivors who remembered. The Council's fleet finally broke apart. Their ships scattered, fleeing into hyperspace, leaving wreckage behind. The humans did not chase, they simply watched. The message had been delivered, clear and final. When the smoke cleared, the nebula glowed red with the light of dying stars. The Terran fleet stood unbroken, surrounded by the silence of victory. Admiral Rayan closed his eyes and whispered, "The wrath of Earth is never for conquest. It is for peace that was denied on Earth." As the broadcast ended, humanity did not celebrate. There were no fireworks, no cheers, only quiet pride, because they knew the galaxy would never see them the same again. From this day on, Earth was not just a planet. It was a promise that no tyrant, no murderer, no conqueror would ever rise unchallenged again. The wrath of Earth was not destruction, it was justice, carried by the hands of those who refused to bow. And as the last human ship vanished into hyperspace, the stars whispered the same truth the galaxy had finally learned. You can threaten many things in this universe, but you never threaten humanity. The fall of the Council, the war was over, but peace did not return at once. After the Battle of Kareth, the galaxy was silent again. Yet this silence was different, heavier, filled with fear and shame. Worlds that once praised the Council now whispered curses behind closed doors. The mighty Council had ruled for 10,000 years. Their words had shaped laws, destroyed empires, and crowned kings. But now their grand chamber stood half empty. Their banners burned, their halls echoing with guilt. Messages from across the galaxy poured in. Planets declared independence. Fleets withdrew from Council control. No one wanted to fight Earth again. No one wanted to be part of the empire that failed. The Council's unity crumbled like dust under its own arrogance. Inside the Capitol dome of the Council world, the High Speaker sat alone. His silver skin had turned pale, his eyes sunken with regret. Every screen around him replayed the same image: Earth's fleet, calm and silent. The fleet that had spared their lives but destroyed their pride. Advisors argued in the corridors. Some demanded surrender to humanity, others wanted vengeance, but deep down they all knew the truth. They were no longer the masters of the stars far away on Earth's moon. Admiral Rayan received the latest reports. He read them quietly, without emotion. "The Council is falling apart," his aide said. Rayan only replied, "They built their power on fear. Now they taste their own medicine." But humanity did not celebrate. Instead, Terran Command launched a new mission, not of war, but of rebuilding. They called it Project Dawn. Its purpose was simple: restore balance, not domination. Human ships began traveling to worlds ruined by centuries of Council control. They brought food, medicine, and technology on planets where slaves once worked for alien masters. Human doctors now healed the sick on barren moons where soldiers starved. Terran engineers built cities of light. At first, the galaxy did not believe it. Many thought it was a trick, another form of conquest. But the humans never asked for tribute, never demanded loyalty. They simply helped. Silently and swiftly soon, smaller species began to side with Earth willingly, not through fear but through hope. They called the humans the guardians of balance, protectors who carried weapons powerful enough to destroy, but hearts strong enough to forgive. Back on the Council world, riots erupted. Citizens shouted, "Why did you bring war upon us?" Statues of the High Speaker were pulled down by his own people. The once mighty rulers now hid behind walls, trembling at their own subjects. Desperate, the High Speaker sent one last message to Earth. He begged for a meeting, his voice broken and full of regret. "Humanity," he said, "we misjudged you. We feared what we did not understand. Teach us what peace truly means." For 3 days, there was no reply. Then one morning, a single Terran ship appeared above the Council's capital. It was not a warship, but a diplomatic vessel marked with Earth's blue emblem. The same ship that once delivered a warning, resolute. When it landed, silence fell across the planet. Crowds gathered, expecting judgment, perhaps destruction. But from the ship emerged not soldiers, but envoys dressed in white. And at their center walked Admiral Rayan himself, unarmed, calm and human. He stood before the broken Council and said, "You asked for peace, so we will give it. Not the kind built on fear, but on truth. Let the galaxy remember, inner peace is not a gift. It is earned every day." He offered no punishment, no demand for surrender. Instead, he handed them a charter, a new code for the galaxy, one that declared every world free, every voice equal. And in that moment, the humans did what no conqueror had ever done. They forgave. The Council fell not by fire, but by conscience, and from its ashes rose a new alliance led not by fear, but by the lessons humanity had carved into the stars. When the news spread, entire civilizations wept. They saw humans not as destroyers, but as proof that strength could serve peace. Even the youngest alien children learned a simple truth in school: never threaten the humans, learn from them instead. That night, Admiral Rayan stood at the viewport of Resolute. The galaxy shimmered before him, countless worlds glowing like candles in the dark. He smiled faintly and whispered, "The war began with arrogance, but ends with understanding." Behind him, the Terran flag waved gently in artificial gravity. Its symbol, a blue circle with a white flame, reflected on his armor. It was more than an emblem now. It was a promise to every being under the stars, that no voice would be silenced, no world abandoned. And if ever darkness rose again, humanity would rise with it. Because Earth did not rule the stars, it watched over them, as both warning and hope. And so the galaxy learned its final lesson. You can fight humans, you can fear them, you can hate them, but you will never forget them. The age of Earth begins years past after the fall of the Council. The scars of war still mark the stars, but life had begun to return. Planets once crushed by tyranny now sang again with color and light. Children who had grown up in fear now laughed beneath open skies. And through it all, one name was spoken with both awe and peace: humanity. The species that refused to kneel yet chose mercy when it held all power. Across the galaxy, monuments rose not to conquerors, but to peacemakers. Their statues were not made of gold or marble, but of metal salvaged from war. Each monument bore the same words: simple and eternal, never threaten Earth, for they fight not for glory but for life. In the capital of the new Galactic Union, the blue flag of Earth flew beside others. No longer feared, it now stood as a symbol of balance. Admiral Rayan had retired long ago. He lived quietly on a small island in the Pacific. Each evening he watched the horizon as Terran ships crossed the skies. He never called himself a hero, only a servant who did what must be done. Sometimes children came to his home to ask questions. Why didn't you destroy the Council when you could? They would ask. Rayan always smiled and said, because victory without mercy makes you the very thing you fought against. Far beyond Earth, the human fleet still patrolled, not as rulers but as guardians. They no longer invaded world, they protected them. Every ship carried the emblem of Earth, the blue circle and white flame. That flame now represented something more than power. It meant hope, memory, and unity. When pirates threatened weak colonies, Terran ships arrived within hours when famine struck alien moons. Human freighters delivered food without payment. The galaxy began to change slowly but surely. Empires gave way to cooperation. Old enemies became trade partners. And peace no longer felt like a dream. And every being knew one truth: peace was built on the memory of Earth's wrath. The archives recorded that wrath in detail. They spoke of how humanity faced extinction yet never gave up. Of how they entered the stars not to conquer but to survive. Of how they showed mercy even to those who would have erased them. But humanity also left warnings carved in metal. Across empty battlefields, memorials glowed with blue light, each one inscribed with the same line: mercy is strength. But never mistake kindness for weakness. In the farthest sector of the known galaxy, explorers found a new world. Lush, green, and untouched by war, they named it Haven, a planet where humans and aliens could live together. No flags, no armies, only families and shared dreams. The first city built there was called Unity Bay. Its streets were lined with gardens and learning halls. At its heart stood a giant silver sphere that reflected the stars, and on its surface were etched the names of every species that once fought each other. When the city was complete, a final ceremony was held. Delegates from thousands of worlds gathered under one sky, and at the center of the crowd stood a new generation of humans, children born after the wars, their eyes bright with curiosity. They did not carry guns. They carried instruments and books. They spoke not of fear but of creation. They were the true proof that humanity had evolved beyond survival, that even after endless wars, compassion had endured in that ceremony. An old recording of Admiral Rayan played across the heavens. His voice echoed softly through the crowd. Humanity was not born perfect, he said. We learned through pain, loss, and fire. But remember this: our greatest weapon was never our ships or our cannons. It was the heart that refused to give up on peace. And if the stars ever forget, may Earth remind them once more. As his words faded, the crowd looked up. A fleet of human ships passed overhead, their hulls gleaming in sunlight. But this time there was no fear, no tension, only wonder, the kind that comes when strength and kindness walk together. That day was marked as the dawn of a new era. Historians would later call it the Age of Earth, an age not ruled by war or domination, but by understanding and respect. And somewhere beyond the stars, in the deep silence of the universe, the galaxy whispered its lesson once more. You can challenge humans, you can test them, you can even break them, but they will always rise again, stronger, wiser, and kinder. Because that is who they are. They are the fire that survives the void, the protectors who once refused to kneel, and the dreamers who turned wrath into peace. The Age of Earth had begun, and the stars would never be the same again.